Back in November 2018, I was arrested at work in front of my boss and coworkers. It was the most humiliating thing I've ever experienced. I later learned at the police station that I was being charged with multiple felonies. This came as a huge surprise. Luckily, I was able to keep my wits and lawyer up instead of speaking with the detective. For $13,000, which completely wiped my savings, I was able to retain a criminal defense attorney. However, it cost me everything, and I was unable to pay my bond. This resulted in me staying in jail for a total of 54 days. At a status hearing, my attorney presented video evidence of me gassing up my car 3 hours away from where the crimes took place, and I ended up having all my charges dismissed. When I finally got out, I learned that I had lost my job, was in the process of being evicted, and my son was in the state's care. His mother is a heroin addict, and I haven't spoken to my own parents in nearly 15 years. They wouldn't let him go to my girlfriend because they didn't consider her family. Since my release, I've learned that I can't sue the police, and no one gives a shit that I was locked up for 54 days because the detective did poor investigation work. I've gone to the local press about this and was told that what happened to me happens quite a bit. They took down my info but never followed up. So what I did was create a website sharing my story. I also uploaded the police report and some other documents from the discovery. Literally, the only reason why I was arrested was because an eyewitness said they saw me. If the detective had done his job, he could have verified that I wasn't even in town on the day the crimes took place. This is what pisses me off the most. My life was ruined because of a lazy employee. My website is now ranked number 2 on the first page of search results when you type in my town's name. I live in a touristy town, and we attract a lot of visitors over the summer. My web traffic has more than quadrupled, and apparently it's gotten someone high up's attention. I received a cease and desist letter recently, which I showed to my attorney. He said sharing my experience online isn't illegal and that everything I had stated was a fact or my own opinion, protecting me from a defamation lawsuit. Yesterday, I received a visit from 2 officers and the detective who had arrested me. He apologized, stating mistakes can happen. They then talked to me about my website and asked if I could remove it. I said I would delete it on the condition that the detective leave his job and never do police work again. Suffice to say that isn't happening. After the visit I received, I'm more pissed off that the only reason the detective apologized to me was to get me to take down my website. I don't plan to, and the only one supporting this is my girlfriend. My friends think I'm being spiteful and have suggested that I just delete it. I used to work on a small team for a division of a multinational company. We used to primarily be staffed by what were called old-timers. Basically people who were close to being of a pensionable age who didn't want the hustle. That culture shifted and a lot of young blood has been brought in. I formerly worked there and was given a lateral move out. A colleague, Tina, still works there. Recently an opening for director came up and Tina came to me for help. She's been doing overtime and working hard to get noticed for this position. She's well qualified for it and has extensive experience at the company, so she was given a chance to interview for it. Tina is a single mother who has overcome poverty in childhood, racists/bigots in the industry, and worked hard to support her kids. She's had health issues but always fought hard. Tina is tenacious and hardworking, but there are issues. She struggles in some areas, and while she'd definitely make a great director as she's contentious, kind and courteous, the role is evolving and may be a bit of a stretch. Nonetheless, I helped her with her application and presentation. Beyond being colleagues, she and I are friends. We spend a lot of time outside of work together. We're the only women of color in our respective areas, and share a lot of our deep feelings and thoughts. She worked hard and put together a good presentation. I was really proud of her. She presented this morning at 9:30 and got through it and was out by 10 o'clock. Most of the other applicants were internal and interviewed yesterday, but one person was recommended by a senior VP in a different department. The guy who was recommended is a 30-year-old hotshot. I think he may actually be in his late 20s. He will soon graduate from an Ivy League MBA and is the definition of corporate style. They gave him a last-minute presentation slot immediately following Tina. I attended all of the presentations. I am not on the hiring committee, but was there to support Tina and see how the presentations went. When the hotshot gave his presentation, it wasn't even close. The 20 of us sat in the room and were dumbfounded. Not only was his presentation visually appealing, but he noticed details none of us ever did, and he developed a pitch that was so innovative that our AVP asked to use a tagline he created. His technical analysis was so spot on that it was spooky. He understood issues facing our business unit without having to be told and had ready solutions to solve the problems. Questions they asked him were more about how he'll do things when he takes over the role. It was made very clear to him that this was his job, and they even provided an unofficial tentative start date. It is very clear that he understands the industry and his past experiences, such as professional work experience as well as winning top case competitions and academic awards, prepared him very well. The presentations were in totally different leagues. After he finished, he made a self-deprecating joke and took questions. He thanked us and left. We all sat there for a minute chatting when the AVP very loudly told the HR director to offer significantly above the salary and hammer out a start date immediately and get a contract signed. The VP who recommended him knew him from the MBA program, as the VP is a case coach there. He said he'd be his reference, and they are skipping all the formalities and going right to the offer. Tina has no idea. She was so happy with her performance, and she's sure she nailed it. She did well, about as well as the other candidates, but this guy is out and out in a different league. Just based on that, I too would hire the other guy. She's sitting on cloud 9 at her desk and planning a celebratory dinner to celebrate her performance. She was told decisions would be made in a couple of weeks. At this rate, it's likely she'll be informed that she didn't get the job well before 5 p.m. I really don't know what to do or say. If she asks, should I be honest about this guy's presentation? Should I avoid her the rest of the day? I want to support her, but have no idea how to even begin talking to her. I have a large family. Mostly aunts and female cousins aside from mom, stepmom, stepsister, and grandmother. I don't know how to say this, but all those women I mentioned above are into teasing and joking. They've formed a unit, which I admit is kind of toxic. And they'd tease and roast every new woman that enters the family by marriage by setting up tests to see if they deserve to be part of the family, or roast their looks and styles to the point of breaking confidence and self-esteem down. Then after a few months of teasing, they'd announce that they've finally welcomed them into the family. The newest member would join in on the teasing too, which is crazy, as my dad says. When I first introduced my then girlfriend, now wife, I made it clear that I didn't want any of the women in the unit to come at her or harass her, not even with a single word. They went behind my back and roasted her looks and job, and I discovered they've been doing it on Facebook. I had them apologize one by one after they gave the "we're just testing the water to see if she's capable to be part of the family" excuse. They didn't want to apologize, but once I said I wouldn't invite any of the unit unless they apologize, including my mom, everyone immediately apologized and brought gifts for my wife. My wedding was 2 weeks ago. There was talk about the women in the family wanting to pull a prank on my wife by wearing white, and called it the ultimate test to see how my wife react. My brother warned me, so I announced that if any one of them showed up in white, I'd have them kicked out, including mom. They said this wasn't true and they'd never do such thing. But they showed up to my wedding one by one wearing white dresses, and each and every one of them was told to leave after they tried giving excuses by either making scenes or getting the men involved. The senior women of the unit, who are mom and aunts, also showed up in white but refused to leave. I threatened to take harsher action and mom was pissed, telling me to step aside, but I didn't let her in. I had her leave while the men in the family were watching stunned. Dad was on my side and supported me a lot. I felt absolutely awful because my wedding was being interrupted by them making scenes. My wife was hurt beyond measure, but the women in the family were pissed. My cousin blasted me on social media later, saying I excluded all the women from the wedding because my wife was so insecure she couldn't handle another woman's presence at her wedding. I had an argument with them and mom berated me, saying it was supposed to be a prank, but I said they were taking it too far. Mom said I took it too far by kicking them out because they were trying to get reaction from my wife to see if she was one of those Bridzillas and were going to change soon as prank was over, but I ruined my own and entire wedding by reacting so aggressively. I stopped talking after she said I had to bring my wife and apologize. I haven't seen the lot of them in 2 weeks and they've excluded me from everything. I just want to explain that, this has been happening for years. The men in the family are split on this behavior. Some of them encourage it like my uncle and my cousin's husbands. One is now an ex, and some are against it like me and my dad and brother. B. The women claim that there's nothing hurtful in what they do because they claim they're just looking out for us men and that their goal, ultimately, is to make sure the women who enter the family are decent. C. My dad always ends up arguing with my mom and grandmother since they're the ones who started this whole thing with their behavior and attitude towards other women. D. And I'm not sure if I should mention this, but my male cousin who's a middle schooler said he'd make sure to leave the country before even meeting any woman because of this, and it made me chuckle. Also, the dresses they showed up in were simple white dresses, nothing over the top, but still were white dresses. I realized they went ahead with their plans even after I stated what I'd do in that case. Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount, and I didn't want to be braggy about it, especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place, and in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister, but it was for non-profit work making $22K year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity //equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen, and we haven't really talked since yesterday.